Mike and I actually met through one of the few Facebook groups that is out there for doctors on social media, I believe, correct?
That's right.
Yes. And he is going to be telling us at the end of the hour, or whatever, however long it takes,
Whoa, okay.
about at the end of the
24 hours.
at the end of this segment about a conference coming up that he is hosting
Yep.
in January. So, and I'm going to be speaking at it, and I'm
speaking at it. Yep.
very, very excited because it's for entrepreneur doctors, and that's a really cool niche.
Yep.
So, let's get into this discussion.
Yes.
All right, Mike, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Mike just came all the way from Palm Springs to be here.
That's right.
Ooh.
I had to come.
We are very honored.
It could be.
Okay, now Mike is currently a practicing physician / entrepreneur
Right.
here in San Diego.
Yes.
And nobody comes out of med school as a physician. Well, very few people come out as a physician / entrepreneur. That is generally something that develops.
Right.
And as with most, since Mike has already told me his story, there are some quits along the way, as we are not surprised. And he is willing to share those with us. So if you could take us back. By the way, Mike and I ended up, even though we met on a Facebook group, we went to the same residency program in Mayo Clinic, Arizona.
Right in Arizona. That would
Small
there's a
world.
kinship there.
I love it. I love it. So after you graduated from residency, take us to where you went first and then what happened there.
Okay, so like you said, family physician trained, come from a family of doctors. My uncle's a thoracic surgeon. My dad's a pediatrician, psychiatrist, a whole bunch of doctors in there. Makes for a crazy family reunion is what I like to say. But anyway, I went from Mayo Clinic in Scottsdale, Arizona. My wife is from San Diego, so we wanted to get back. And we ended up moving to Escondido, which is a city in North County of San Diego. And, I didn't know any better, right? So I go from residency to going into the clinic. And, they said it gets easier when you go from residency to the clinic, but that wasn't necessarily the case. But I didn't know any better, right? So I was basically did everything. So I was hired as a family physician, but I was also in charge of the urgent care. I was in charge of occupational medicine part. I was doing nursing home rounds. And basically what the powers that be that told me was, since you're the new guy, you need to bring up your patients. You need to get more patients. So we've got a little extended hour urgent care. So let's have you there once a week at night. Okay, great. You need to get more geriatric patients. Let's have you be a nursing home director. Let's have you become a nursing home director for 3 nursing homes. Wow. So not with increased pay, by the way. This is all just taking all of these different things. And basically, I didn't know any better. And I was just busy working, and, I thought I had it made, right? So I've got my family here. We bought a house in beautiful San Diego County. Everything is going right. But then I realized that what I envisioned as a doctor and what I was actually doing, there was incongruencies there. And I remember let's say I'm a little bit older than you, but I was on call in 1999. So if you know about what happened on January 1st, 2000, everybody was concerned about Y2K. What was going to happen? Are the computers going to go down? What's going to happen with all the medical records? And, of course, they put the new guy, they put him on call that night in the hospital, okay? And long story short is when I would be on call, I'd get stuck on New Year's Eve call, Christmas call, Thanksgiving call. That's just my luck, right? So I ended up meeting another doctor who we kind of shared call with. He's an older doctor. Let's just call him Dr. Jones. And he was a family practitioner. He had a solo practice out kind of in the boonies of San Diego, but we kind of shared call. And I got to know him through just our meetings or going to farm up dinners or such. And this guy was in his 50s, but he looked like he was in his 70s. He wasn't in the best of health. And we were hanging out at the ER at 4 o'clock in the morning on a Christmas morning here. And I knew I was on there because they told me to be on call. But I asked him, why are you on call? And he basically said that he gets better pay if he comes on Christmas Day, if he takes holiday call. And so he volunteered to do this. And I go, well, don't you want to be with your, because I knew he had like a bit of a family. He said, in no uncertain terms, after I got to know him, for a while, he says, I have to work. The reason why I have to work, I've got a big family. I get paid a little more. And Lynn, he looked older than most of my patients. He looked like he needed to be admitted to the hospital. And I kind of envisioned myself, I see, he passed away a few years ago, but I said, is this where I want to be, 20, 30, 40 years from now, having to be on Christmas morning call because maybe I get a couple of extra $100 more, uh, or I have to work because I didn't plan or didn't do what I was supposed to do in terms of looking at additional streams of income or whatever, investing, etc. And I didn't like that. And it wasn't what I envisioned where I wanted to be. So, and then that was kind of my first big, ideas of, you were talking earlier about the symptoms of quitting. That was like looking in the mirror, looking to the future, seeing where I was, and I didn't like what I was seeing. But, I was still going on, taking call and everything like that. And then what happened to me was a personal event. I have two children. They're adults now, but at the time, I had my second son was 4 or 5 years old. Long story short, he was diagnosed with autism. And back then, we didn't know what we don't know now. We didn't know of all the signs, and it was still kind of new to us, but it was really a shock to the system for myself and for my wife. And I wanted to be there for my son, of course, and I wanted to go to all of his visits, his rehab, etc. I mentioned earlier I was the son of a doctor. My dad wasn't always there for me, and I said, I want to be there for my kids. And long story short, I approached my uh, non-physician CEO if I could go half time. I wasn't even talking about quitting altogether. That wouldn't even come into my consciousness that I wanted to do this. I just wanted to go half time, and he probably smirked or I don't know what I envisioned, but he says, Mike, you've got a busy practice. If I have to give you half time, I have to give everybody, right? You probably heard similar stories, and so I said, I didn't tell him that, but I made steps to actually quit, to do that. And it was a personal decision. It was, they obviously aren't supporting me, and I've done everything they've asked me to do for them, and that actually led to leading to quitting.
I love that. Because you did the thing that I suggest so many doctors should start with if there's some part of their practice that isn't working, which is ask the question, can I change something about my practice? Maybe it's the schedule, maybe it's the type of patients you're seeing or the types of procedures you're doing. So you made the ask, right? And then always the second part of that is, if they don't respond to your ask in a positive way or try to make some kind of deal, maybe you could say, okay, let's try 3/4 time,
Right.
If they just refuse to budge, then like you said, they don't have your greatest good in mind. They're looking at their bottom line. They're
Exactly.
looking from a fear perspective of, if we give this to you, we're going to give this to everybody. Well, not everybody's asking for it.
Exactly.
They might want to make full-time pay, and you at this point have a reason you're willing to go to half-time. But if they see it from that bottom line instead of with you as a person coming to them with a need, then you did the absolute right thing that you should do at that point, which is find a way out. Because you have to be you could like your career as much as you want, but if you're in a company culture that doesn't support you, you could still end up like that guy who looks 20 years older than he does and is still, I think a lot of people have a misconception about medicine that we're just going to make a lot of money, and family docs are not making a lot of money. And sometimes I think people get to the realization all too late when they get there and they're like, why are you having to work Christmas Eve? Oh, you still need to work extra this many years into your career? Wow. So you start planting the seeds for your quit at that point, right? What kind of preparations did you make? What, like, financial preparations, and then plans for what you're going to move to next? What went on at that point?
Well, yeah. So to get going back, this is quite a while ago. I've always been entrepreneurial. And we were in Phoenix at Mayo Clinic, and I think it's the second year we get to actually moonlight and such.
Yes.
So my wife got pregnant as I was an intern at Mayo, and I was too young, or I couldn't do moonlighting. I couldn't work at Cigna or all the other places, and but I've always been entrepreneurial, and in terms of the internet, I actually helped create the form of Dr. Edwards, if you remember, asked me to kind of work on a website for the Mayo Clinic residency program, and I was just kind of like fooling around with it a little bit. And I learned up HTML, which is the language of the web, and this is 1996, 97. There's basically nothing out there, right? But I started to create a website for the residency, and then I was starting to get questions about from other doctors or pre-meds or wannabe doctors about how to get into the residency. Mayo Clinic was my first choice. So I was giving them advice. And what ended up happening was I started a little side business at the time. They didn't even call it side gigs. They call it side gigs now.
Yeah.
But I started a page where I was getting all of these questions about residency. Well, I said, well, why don't I just I don't have time. I'm an intern. I don't have time to answer all these questions. I said, what I'll do is I'll type up all of the frequently asked questions about how to get into the residency of your choice, and I'll sell it. I went to Kinko's and I'll sell it for $15. And if you wanted it, you can mail me. There was no PayPal back then,
Right.
so you can mail me a check, which I learned. Don't put your home address because you're sending this out onto the web.
Wow.
And what ended up happening is I built a little business around it. My wife, like I said, she was pregnant at the time, but we were getting a lot of questions about how can I help me with my CV or my personal statement. She said, "Well, I can do that. I'm a librarian. I can do this part." And we started our little service business on it. I didn't say I got rich on it, but it helped us when we were struggling in terms of extra income. That was coming out. It helped us buy a truck, and we started a little business that would last for about a few years. But long story short, I've always been entrepreneurial, and then one of the things that I was doing during my full-time practice was I was creating little what they called information products, little ebooks. So I created some little ebooks. One was on how to save money on your prescription bill, and I created all these little ebooks that, again, we're talking 2003, 2004. There was no Facebook. There was basically you had Google, and I created these books, and I created all these books and websites, and then actually I ended up was actually making more than I was as a doctor at the time.
Wow.
It really it snowballed. And I had mentors to help me, to get to where I wanted to be, which is important. You always want to invest in anything that you do, but that eventually led to me actually leaving. So I actually, in terms of actually preparation, I had a little internet side business at the time that really kind of took off that allowed me the courage, to actually quit. One thing that I did want to mention that I said, I think this might be unique, is when I actually told them that I wanted to quit, it was not give a 2-week notice and leave. It was, oh, let's get back to on this. First they didn't think I was serious that I wanted to quit, and then it was, well, we have to find you a replacement because you have all these patients, and there were some guilt trips that they put on me. But I was also a shareholder in my practice, meaning I had invested money, and if I wanted to quit, I would have to pay that money back somehow. So it wasn't a 2-week notice. It was I have to pay to quit on there. And then I was nice about it. I could have stayed on much shorter than I was. I stayed on about 6 months, but I had an obligation to my patients. I wanted to make sure that they were being taken care of, whatever doctor they had to replace me. So it was about 6 months before I actually did leave, yeah.
And when you did leave, you went for a period of time without doing something clinical, correct?
Well, that's another side of my story, because being married is, my wife was kind of a bread earner through the internship. She was a librarian at Grand Canyon University, and she kind of basically helped me get through. Not in terms of finances, we had medical school loans and such, but she helped, with bringing the bacon for that. So she was not as receptive of me leaving medicine to start up my little ebook internet business kind of thing. It didn't play well. At least I told her. I didn't even tell my mom. I didn't even tell my mom until she goes, "Everything right, Michael?" But she said, well, before you leave, maybe you can do something part-time. And I did, and I found like an Indian health service job, paid for some of my public health uh, forgiveness in terms of my loans. I did for like twice a week, and then after about a year, then I eventually left.
Gotcha. So
Yeah,
then,
clinically for a while.
yeah. So there was a like petering out period.
Yeah, it wasn't bad for them. It was more for my wife.
Ah, fair enough. I like this.
Yeah.
Full disclosure.
Hey, I'm all about transparency, right? So
I love it. I appreciate that. So a lot of docs, I think, have this fear of what is my identity if I leave clinical medicine, if I stop practicing medicine. And not that you ever lose the degree. I mean, even if you are grossly involved in malpractice, you still somehow have the degree.
right.
But you're still a doctor at the end of the day. But I feel as though a lot of people wrap their identity a little bit in the caring for patients
Yes.
portion. And other people of us don't, that's not so much where we get our satisfaction. And for some of us, it's not at all for us. And I've had this discussion recently with somebody who's going to be on the podcast soon. Her name is Michelle. And she's like, I realized clinical medicine was not for me at all. And so,
Right.
there are people that go into pathology and radiology, but you had to face this period where you decided, okay, I'm not going to do clinical medicine anymore. Did you have any of those identity concerns, or were you just as fond of doing tech things as you were of medicine, so it wasn't an issue?
You always have something, whether it be kind of scorn or perceived scorn from your colleagues. I was joking about my mom, but that was actually a big deal with my mom. Um, my dad's always he's a doctor, but he's always been entrepreneurial, or he tries to be entrepreneurial, so he was okay with it. But I also felt bad, just like, because I had patients that I over the 5 years I was there. Um, I do think now it's a lot easier to get away from that. I mean, back then there was no Facebook groups, support groups. I mean, there's a lot of support for doctors leaving the bedside or going away for a few years. I didn't have anything really of that. And also in terms, just maybe where I grew up, I was kind of the Marcus Welby. If anybody's my age who remembers that, the typical MD where the family doctor, where their patients bring, or what I thought in medical school, this is how it would be, where people would bring like bread and and those kinds of things, and you would do house calls. Or just basically that you would be in a job that you would stay on for 20, 30, 40 years. And now in the younger generation, and my perception is it's okay to go from job to job and, in your search for fulfillment of whatever that is.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a big difference, luckily for us. But you brought up a phrase that I want to go back to, which was perceived scorn.
Yes.
So good, because that describes most scorn, right? Like,
Yeah.
how often does somebody actually scorn you to your face?
That's right.
It's mostly just we assume other people are going to scorn our
Right,
decision.
right.
Some will be bold about it. But did you have any actual in-person backlash, or was it mostly the thought, maybe the mindset of, oh my gosh, people are going to be thinking about my quit negatively?
No, I mean, I heard comments like, "Oh, Mike, what's he doing? What is he doing?" And they, "Oh, he'll be all right. He's all right." But I got to the point where, I learned early on that I'm unemployable. Not that I don't have the skills, I don't do well with bosses for whatever that is, and it just wasn't for me. And I didn't feel that I was we were saying, that they didn't have the best interests of me at heart. And I got to the point, and I work with doctors and who go through this, we talk about these issues, is they're not thinking about you, they're thinking about themselves. And there was some scorn, but I actually found out there was actually more envy.
Yes.
There was more envy as he was able to do it. Maybe there's some who just wanted me to fall flat on my feet, and I'm sure there's a little bit of that where there's some envy, jealousy kind of going on in there. But I'm gonna keep it clean because I don't know your language. I just said screw it. I'm just gonna. This is what I want to do. This is for my family. I want to be there for my kid, and if they're not willing to help me out, I'm just gonna quit.
Oh, I love that very much.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. They're projecting on, or they're just jealous, and it's easier to come, instead of saying like, "Gosh, I don't have the courage to do what he's doing," just to scorn at it. And So anytime that you have perceived scorn or you have actual scorn and you hear actual comments, stop and think in your head, these are probably the reasons. Like, I can't think of a really good reason why somebody would scorn you that wasn't one of the following. Like, they don't have the same risk aversion to
Hmm.
you, or they're jealous of you doing it, or there's like, I can't see a good reason because I think most people, if down deep, are probably pretty like they want they're envious that you have the courage to do this thing. I mean, leaving clinical medicine is no small deal. And so it's probably a lot of people find what you're doing admirable
Hmm.
if you really get down to it,
Right.
but it's kind of our egos that fight with that and think like, "Oh gosh, I so wish I could do that I'm just going to be angry at him about his
Right. Right.
ability." And so I'm glad that never stopped you. That's incredible. So how have things been since you made the transition?
Well, since I made the transition, I'm still unemployable.
I love that.
I've basically, I eventually that little ebook business turned into another business. So I created um, a software that actually did multi-millions. It made about $7 million in sales. I had a um, founder of it that I eventually sold. Um, the thing about in medicine, and again, it's in different states, but this is a question that I know you got some doctors in the audience. Is depending on when you quit, you need to know the regulations in your state. And I was one of the things that I love to do is I love talking with doctors, and I had a few students who were doctors who I helped to consult them in terms of entrepreneurial uh, coaching that I did. And one of my uh, students was saying, Mike, I'm going to have to hold off on the coaching for right now. I might have to go back into medicine. He says, well, what's going on? And she said that I got a letter from the state saying they noticed that I've not been in practice, and unless I start seeing patients, I would have to go to some type of medical retraining for a year, which costs about $50,000 out of my own pocket
Oh my.
unless I see patients. So, you know how that was like, oh my goodness. But what about myself? I'd been out for
Yeah.
a few years. Besides some of my hypochondriac entrepreneur friends, I hadn't really been practicing medicine. And so I said, well, I'll do some locum tenens, and then I did like 30 minutes. Went up to someplace in the high desert up in the upper Riverside County where there's like no physicians within this amount of, it's like in the country there's like the least amount of physicians per capita on there. And about 30 minutes, I realized that I'm unemployable again. And I said, I got some business skills. Why don't I, if I'm going to have to go back into medicine, why don't I start my own practice? So I started a little practice up in North County. It was a hormone replacement, um, integrative medicine, because those were things that I was most interested in. Eventually ended up going to med spa, and then we've now had a series of clinics in Southern California. I still practice medicine. I work about 2 days out of the week, about 10 to 12 hours, and the rest is, going after ventures like this. I built some passive income streams that have helped me get to where I want to be. But if it wasn't for that first courage of actually quitting, I would probably still be that Dr. Jones. I was heading into that
Yeah.
direction there. I'm not saying everything is flowers and roses and all that, but I'm at a better place than I was, 20, almost 20 years ago. So,
I love that. I love how you went and you found some niche in medicine that you did enjoy.
yes.
That's so crucial for all the docs out there who are thinking, I can't handle clinical medicine anymore. There's a wide variety. We
Hmm.
had the first doctor I had on here was Dr. Amy Killen. She was an
Hmm.
ER doc running herself ragged, and then she ends up going into anti aging medicine,
Right.
loves it. And over and over, I hear these stories of find a niche. There are lots of
Yes.
niche clinics, the men's health clinic, the women's health
Hmm.
clinic, the hormone replacement, the med spa,
Hmm.
all kinds of things you can do. I do compensation and pension physicals.
Hmm.
So does
Yeah.
so does Mike. We found that out on our phone call, and it's a very small corner of the world of medicine, but it works for us.
It does, and maybe we shouldn't say it Facebook Live. I do it because I like vets, but I don't need to go through that continuity of care for those patients, and there's somebody else that are handling on it. Basically, if you don't know what that is, it's basically we're in San Diego. It's a big military town. A lot of veterans here have got a lot of ailments that they've either acquired in active duty or something related to active duty, and then depending on what type of injuries they have, they're afforded some type of compensation, and our job is to determine if it's accurate or not. So, but I enjoy it, but it also helps, you know, for you to help explore other avenues for like yourself, to do the things that brings you joy
Yeah.
into your own life as
Yeah,
well.
it does. And that's a huge part of my story and why I love to pass on what I've learned, because I was miserable in sports medicine and I thought,
Uh-huh.
okay, what parts of it can I take and find? And I did what you did in a manner of speaking, is I did moonlighting just enough to pay the bills
Hmm.
until I found this job. And moonlighting, for those who don't, I'm going to cover a few terms, but maybe we didn't cover. Moonlighting is, when you work
Yeah.
a second job at night. Locum tenens is what doctors can like fly around the country, and if you fill in for a doc who's going on vacation here, or sub for somebody going on sabbatical there. So that's the thing. There are so many opportunities in medicine. So do not feel trapped if you have this medical degree and you don't want to do the traditional clinical medicine. There are many other options out there. But for me, I just found my job on Twitter and I was looking at everything. I was
Twitter.
looking, yeah, I did. Because I got really desperate when I
Yeah.
realized, man, I cannot. I did the same thing you did.
Hmm.
I thought after fellowship, okay, I'm going to try part-time sports medicine. After 3 days, I had the same kind of like, oh, not employable as a regular doctor
Yeah.
thing. And luckily, they said we don't have enough patients to keep you. So I was like, phew, almost, dodged that bullet. And then I thought, okay, now we've got to get serious and only take the jobs I really
Hmm.
want. I don't want to be doing sports medicine. Stop
Yeah.
saying, okay, I'll do it halftime. Like, no. And so then I went and I thought, okay, I'll work with electronic medical records because I like tech more than I like
Hmm.
patient care and continuity, like you said. And then I found this job that said just do these exams, and I found it on Twitter. And so when people are like, I'm not sure what to do with my medical degree, I'm like, if I can find a job on Twitter in 2010,
Hmm.
2009, when Twitter wasn't even quite as big,
Yeah.
you can find jobs out there. Just, there's a million Facebook groups, and Kevin MD, who's the like home
Hmm.
for all non-clinical doctors.
Yeah.
So that leads us to today, where you are now putting on this conference. Tell us a little bit about the conference.
So we're talking about passions. One of my big passions is actually connecting with doctors like yourself. Doctors who maybe you know don't fit into that peg, right? Where that round hole, the square peg, um, and or just willing to do these kinds of things. Back in 2000, 2004, there was no support. Maybe if there was, I didn't see it. I think the only thing I saw, like the AMA puts out some book called "Leaving the Bedside" that costs like $80 that you can buy, and that's about it. But there was no support group or Facebook group or anything like that, and I didn't. I had been consulting with entrepreneurs in general, and to be honest, I didn't even want to talk to doctors. One is I still felt that perceived scorn from my colleagues. If you tell a surgeon what to do, forget it on it. But those same doctors actually came to me and said, "Hey, can you show me how you did this little internet business thing, on the side?" Um, and then I said, "Well, why don't I'd like to work with doctors." And then, I got into meeting other doctors connected online. I talked about, I met Pam Weibel last year, if you don't know, but in the physician community, she's a big advocate for prevention of physician suicide, which unfortunately is one of our biggest issues in medicine these days. And it's because they feel so trapped. And and I don't know exactly why that is. I mean, I've got some theories. I think I've mentioned to you in the call that we're risk averse as doctors. Um, we'd rather have a double-blinded placebo study before we quit,
Yes.
before we actually go do it. And even then, we're going to ask a question anonymously on some Facebook group and to
Yeah.
decide our fate. Um, but I saw that I see the same issues that I had, with doctors, that I had myself. And, whether it's inspiration through me or yourself, maybe there's a way that we can actually go and give more value. Because I think I was listening to one of your podcasts is, if someone is working as an employee and they're depressed and they're not going to be as much value to whoever they're serving, and it's doctors serving patients. And if I can help 1,000 doctors be add more value to them, like what they do, how much impact is going to have on all the patients that they may or may not have, or just in general do. I feel I impacted more doctors in my own practice. I've got lots of different practices, but I've been able to add more value. It's not really about the money. It's really adding more value to them. And that's why I decided to put on this event. It's called BootcampMD. It's happening in San Diego in January. Speakers like yourself, these really weird physicians that I got who felt that there's other ways that you can add more value, add more things to other people's lives, and not necessarily just be open that there's so many options that are out there right now for physicians. We kind of joke about what are the different options, but majority of don't even know about this.
It's true.
They just say once you go out of residency, you work at some place like Kaiser or somewhere. Anything against Kaiser, but work at some place for 30 years, and at the end of the 30 years, hopefully you got some 401k thing that you can do. But that wasn't life for me. I know that wasn't the life for you. And maybe there's a way if we can introduce you to what other doctors are doing. We've got, a doctor who works a day a week and has built passive income streams through real estate and investments. We've got another doctor who doesn't practice at all and started her own coaching company, and she's very being fulfilled through that. A doctor like yourself who has a whole brand now involved in quitting. I never even thought this was possible. that you could do that. You can do that. And again, I think right now we're in the greatest time. We got the internet. We're going live, and take it from somebody who was getting. If you wanted to pay me to write checks in the mail to a home address, there is so much opportunity out there to reach these people. I've been blessed to, with my company, I was able to speak around the world and go into all these different places that they found me just because I had a website, and somehow I connected with them. And now you've got Facebook Live, you got webinars, you got so many ways to connect, Messenger, all that kind of stuff. It's all about being authentic too. And it's, if you can't get there live, you can get there, through the internet. And there really wasn't a conference that I saw where physicians could get together, talk about what's going on. Some of them have successful businesses. Some of them want to have a entrepreneur. And anybody is welcome that. And that's why I kind of doing the event, just to connect, and maybe that one nugget that they get out of it, maybe a little spark something that could lead to different conversations and connect that way. So
great.
That's why we do it.
Yeah. When and where can they find it?
So it's happening on January 26th and 27th in 2019, as we're taping this in December. It's in San Diego, in the Little Italy district. There's a cool little hotel called the Porta Vista Hotel. I've had events in the past. It's really close. If you're flying in from the airport, they even do like an airport shuttle there. And it's happening in San Diego. So the website to go to is www.bootcampmd.com/go, and we can put a link, I guess.
We will put
on
many
there.
links, yes.
And we go in there and check this out. If you have any questions, you can contact us. Information there on the forum, and let us know that Lynn Marie sent you, and we'll take care of them.
Oh, very, very cool. I look forward to meeting everybody who ends up coming there and speaking with all the doctor entrepreneurs. And I'm very grateful that you came on our show today. I love your story. We were talking about, every quitting has a little bit unique angle. He's like, I might be the first person who paid to quit. I'm like, you may be.
I've got a lot to quit.
55 episodes, and you might be. Actually, I recorded more like 60, and for sure, I think that's probably the first one. But I love your unique angle, and I always love having doctors on to talk about the very specific struggles of quitting medicine.
Right.
There's a lot that goes into it, and I appreciate you sharing your story.
Well, thanks for having me.
Anytime. All right, for everybody else out there, until next time, happy quitting. Bye, Facebook. All right. Oh, I think
How was that?
it was great.